Congressman, great to have you with us today, sir.
So glad to be with you, John. Thank you very much.
I tell you what, you're in the middle of all of the action now, being on the House Financial Services Committee. We've survived, Congressman, 3 days of the sequester. The sky hasn't dilapidated on us. My automobile actually started up today. So, I got to work. The pavement didn't open up and engulf my vehicle. What's the plan now? I mean, what happens if kind of the sequester kicks in, no one dies? Then do people say, well, maybe this isn't so bad?
Well, I think that you have to sort of put all this in perspective and go back to how we got here, because it in the run up to last Friday, it was quite remarkable to hear the president and his hysteria about it. If you recall, and I'm sure your listeners have been reminded by you that this all started in August 2011 when the president came to Congress asking to raise the credit card limit, wanted to raise the limit on the credit card and borrow more money to pay off obligations of the United States. And it was at that time that we agreed to the $2.2 trillion cut, and $1 trillion was made immediately, and the rest of it was supposed to be made. The 1.2 was going to be made by commission, and that commission famously failed. So, as we rolled up to December 31st, the first sequester deadline, the president was wholly unprepared for making these cuts in as thoughtful a way as possible. And of course, we on the House side had offered him up two different opportunities to try to avoid making them in an across the board way and making them in a thoughtful way. And then of course the sequester got kicked till March 1st. Certainly one of the reasons that I voted against the fiscal cliff bill to begin with. But when we got to March 1st, once again, wholly unprepared, and even when the Senate talked about trying to give him more flexibility so that he could make the cuts, he said he would veto the bill, and instead went on the road with his campaign. And so I think the American people can decide for themselves what his motivations are. As we headed into this, now as it turns out, it is not nearly as bad as he and all of his administration made it out to be.
Right.
We shall see. I mean, there will be effects in Virginia, and we know that to be the case. And so it's my hope that this week that we will take up a continuing resolution that will allow the military to reorder cuts so that you are making cuts in Pentagon budgets in some of the bureaucracy of the Department of Defense, as opposed to in any way jeopardizing military readiness for men and women on the front.
Exactly.
And that's the most important thing. And I just hope that the president will be reasonable, because at this point he needs to stop playing politics. He needs to be focusing on what is the best thing for the people of this country and in my district, the 5th District of Virginia.
Well, Congressman, do you think that President Obama overplayed his hand on this deal? It's hard for me to say or give advice to the president, but it strikes me that none of the the hysteria running up to March 1st was helpful. It seems to me, again, if he didn't do his homework and wasn't prepared for this event, then that's on him. I mean, he is the chief executive officer of the country, and it's his responsibility to make sure that when given this situation, that he's working in the best interests of the American people, and to refuse to deal with this back in the summertime when the House of Representatives, where I am, where we opened the conversation. We gave our alternative, and he refused us at that point in favor of presidential politics, and did so again in the lame duck session when we once again offered our alternative. And so again, it does make you question his motivation. Now, if we could switch over for a second, Congressman, to your committee, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke appeared on your in front of your committee the other day. Share your thoughts on how you think the Fed chairman did and what some of your deepest concerns are.
Well, as we all know, we borrow 40 cents on every dollar we spend in Washington, and that's why the sequester issue is so very important. Is that the cuts need to be made, and by the same token, they need to be made in a thoughtful way that doesn't wreck the economy or jeopardize our national defense. But at the end of the day, we can't continue to borrow 40 cents on every dollar we spend. We can't continue to rack up $16 trillion plus in debt. The problem for the United States, it strikes me, and the Federal Reserve is at the forefront of this, is that we have borrowed $16 trillion.
Yes.
And the question is if we continue to borrow money, and the Federal Reserve continues to engage in quantitative easing, which it is just gobbling up U.S. debt and feeding the beast. If the Federal Reserve continues to, which it had indicated, and the chairman indicated last week, if it continues to keep interest rates at historic lows and forecasts that, or broadcasts that for the near future, what are the effects? Are we actually solving anything, or are we just masking what the problem is? And I would suggest to you that what we've done, granted with good intentions in trying to
Sure.
to mask or to prevent and ameliorate the catastrophic consequences of bad fiscal policy and a weak economy. Are we masking that and then just delaying the inevitable? And because if you think that we're in bad shape now, think about what happens if the interest rates could start to go back up.
Scary.
Suddenly, that 16 trillion. Instead of paying $200+ billion a year in interest, we're paying $800 billion a year.
That's over.
Interest.
Congressman, I would like to ask you a question that a listener called in with just before you came on the air. And I want to set this up by informing people that the combination of economic assistance and military assistance in our foreign aid budget is projected to be about $56 billion. The listener asked, why is it that we continue to pay foreign aid to countries that are not our allies?
I think it's a great question, and it's something that I think on the House side we have really pressed to start asking the hard questions that I think sometimes haven't been asked when it was sort of the go spend of the last 10, 20 years. Clearly, there is I think for our national security interests, there's got to be a place for some foreign aid in terms of dealing with our place in the world and how we secure that for ourselves and for our children, and make sure that to the extent that there are threats to us, which there are, we need to be sure that we're fighting that elsewhere, not here on U.S. soil. And so to the extent that is a way to help deal with that, yes. But when you have things like we see unfolding in Egypt, where there's a real question about whether or not whether those folks have our best interests at heart.
Sure.
We've got to reconsider, and I think err on the side, especially when we're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar we spend. We're borrowing money for China to pay to arm people that are not our friends. That's ridiculous, and so I think we have to constantly look at that, and it's a tough issue, but it's one that we got to get right.
Now, regardless of our place in the world as probably the most benevolent country on the globe, two figures jump out at me here. From the Middle East and North Africa, we're paying Iraq just over $1 billion in aid. We're also looking at paying Russia. Why we're paying Russia anything, I would wonder. And Afghanistan is primarily military aid. But the thing that struck me about these figures from USAID is the fact that Afghanistan, which is getting about $5 billion, really depends on us because 97% of their GDP is reliant on foreign aid. Would you be in favor of going line by line down the foreign aid budget and just start
Absolutely.
slashing there?
No, listen, and where we are, again, and the figures that keep me up at night, and the figures I think about when I go to when I go to work every day are, again, we're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar we spend. We've racked up $16 trillion in debt. And if we don't get this straight, what we're going to end up with is a Greek-style debt crisis. And so, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. We have got to scrutinize every line within the budget and making common sense, difficult decisions, albeit very sometimes difficult, sometimes not. Decisions about the kind of aid that we give to foreign countries is something that we have to scrutinize. I mean, we have to, again, remember, we're borrowing money from creditors like China, for instance, who I think it's safe to say doesn't always have our best interest in mind. We have to consider that we're putting ourselves in that position in favor of providing assistance to countries, again, who some whether they have our best interest at heart
Right.
or not, at the bottom, at the end of the day, it really is a matter of whether or not we can afford it, and these are questions that that Washington never asks. Can we afford something? Shall we prioritize our spending in this country? And that's I hope changing. Certainly, I think that there's a majority sentiment within our Republican caucus that these are really, really important questions, and prioritization of spending is a very, very important part of our obligation as a Congress.
Well, Congressman, you nailed it. And when you look at taking a common sense approach, I mean, it's very difficult for somebody people like us on the other side of this microphone to take the sequester seriously when our Secretary of State just goes to Egypt over the weekend and gives away $250 million to a regime that is not friendly to us, that we're not sure exactly where they stand. They certainly don't have our interests at the top of their agenda right now at this point in time. And then, as you say, we have to borrow the money from China to pay Egypt, and then we're paying, interest on that. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, and to me, when I was in the state legislature in Richmond, we balance our budget every year. And the definition of a bipartisan budget at the end of any year, when I was there, was that was not that you had Republicans saying we have to balance the budget and Democrats saying, oh no, we don't have to balance the budget. We need to, we need to spend as much as we can. That wasn't the dynamic. The dynamic was both sides knew that we had to act fiscally responsible. We had to balance our budget. And so the definition of bipartisan budgeting was that you had a real bipartisan conversation about what the priorities were. So there were Democratic priorities and there were Republican priorities, and the question is how do you figure within the balanced budget?
Right.
How do you assign those priorities so that they reflect the will of the body, the will of the General Assembly? In Washington, it's quite different. You have Republicans talking about trying to balance the budget, and you have Democrats who don't care anything about balancing the budget, and are taking it to taking spending to a new level. That's where I come from. That's the way it strikes me that we ought to be budgeting and spending money in Washington, and I hope that the sequester is the sort of thing that helps us get to where we need to be.
Congressman, we thank you for the time, and before we go, we want to alert folks that you're one of the few that continues to hold local office hours around the state, and coming up in Lunenburg and Halifax on Friday, the 8th. We thank you for your time and for your great efforts to keep folks in your district well informed.
Many thanks, and I enjoyed being on your program, and hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you so much. That's Representative Robert Hurd from the 5th District, a key member, John, of the House Financial Services Committee, as we found out, of course.